Gaylynne Frankie Erickson Boyack. Gaylynne, Gaylynne, and Frankie's Frankie, then Erickson, Erickson, and Boyack, Boyack.
Let's talk first about where you were born.
I was born in Salt Lake City, Utah, August 3rd, 1945.
And what stories did you grow up hearing about the day you were born?
I didn't hear anything. Other than I was born at 7 o'clock at night. And I was my father's fifth daughter, and his name was Frank. So I was given the name Frankie as a middle name. But I didn't like it. I didn't tell very many people about it. I still don't.
And Gaylynne, how did you get that name? Do you know?
The only thing I know is my oldest sister had a girl by the name of Gaylynne in her school, and my mother liked the name.
So you were the youngest of 5 daughters.
Well, yes, but I was only the youngest of 3 daughters because my father had been married previously.
So how many children were in the house when you grew up?
3.
All girls.
All girls.
Wow, you had a thing or two to learn about men when you got married.
I did.
We can talk about that later. So where were you born? In Salt Lake City?
Yes.
And did you grow up here?
Yes, I did.
You spent all your life in Salt Lake.
Until I got married.
What did your father do for a living?
He was a butcher.
Where?
O.P. Skaggs, and also, let me think, I can't think of, Wally, what's the...
He had his own for a while.
Yeah, he had his own, and I'm trying, what was the... I'm sorry, I can't remember this person's name, who was an apostle. What are their names, Wally? Can you remember? Worthland. He worked for Worthland's, you know, at their meat market for years and years.
Did your mother work outside the home?
She did. She started when I was in 2nd grade. I was still 7, and she went to work for the Salt Lake County. So I was by myself, you know, going to school. She'd get up and fix my hair every morning with ringlets, and I'd be ready for school by 10 to 8, and I would sit until 8:30, and then I would leave and walk to school.
What school did you go to?
I went to Dilworth Elementary, and then I came home, and my next sister, older than I, was 4 years older than, you know, than I am, and so she was, you know, I was okay until, you know, 2nd grade to 6th grade, and then she went to junior high. So from 3rd grade on, that's when I sat by myself before I, you know, so my mother was very trusting in those days that you'd walk to school and do all that stuff, and I never missed a day of school. I remember that. That's not anything interesting, but I do remember getting awards every year because I didn't miss school the whole 6 years in elementary school, or 7 years, I guess, with kindergarten.
Good for you. What were your parents like when you were young?
They worked forever. They were working. We were always raised with a work ethic. You know, we had to work in the gardens. We had to work all the time. And they struggled. My father never made a lot of money. And that's why my mom went to work.
I see. What do you think you learned from that experience, growing up like that? Did it help you sort of form the way you wanted to raise your children?
Yes, it did. Because I was independent, and I felt like, you know, I didn't have grandparents. They were deceased, and I just felt like I kind of raised myself. And so when I was raising my kids, I wanted to be more involved in their lives.
You wanted to be closer to them.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice. What are the 3 words that best describe your father?
That's a hard one. He had a good sense of humor.
I'm sorry, can you start that over again by saying, my father had a good sense of humor?
Do you want me to do that on all of them?
What other words would you say about him?
Maybe.
He's eccentric?
Depends.
Okay.
Or not?
He worked hard.
Yeah. My father had a good sense of humor. He worked hard. He wore a bow tie every day. I don't know another word to describe him. I can't think of another word. I wasn't terribly close to him. You know, in those days, I was afraid of him. So I didn't have a really close relationship with my father.
Did that change as you grew into adulthood?
Not really, a little bit, but not too much. You know, he was just kind of standoffish with everybody. You know, he was just on his. I don't know.
A bit reserved?
Reserve might not be the word I would use. Kind of like that we were in the way a lot, but I don't know how to describe that. I don't want to have that come across though to my grandkids that I
He
wasn't.
had his own agenda.
Yeah, maybe I should say that. He had his own agenda, you know. And he drank. And so as a consequently, I didn't want to be around him because I'd be afraid if his temper would come up, you know, rise, and then I'd be in trouble. So I studied, you know, and that's how I got out of having a relation. I mean, you know, that's why I stayed away from him a little bit.
And can you tell me 3 words to describe your mother?
A hard worker, angelic. She wanted to do everything she could for us. And loving.
Were you close to her?
Yes. I could tear up talking about her now.
You must have loved her very much.
She just died 5 years ago. She was 94.
Did you help take care of her before she passed away?
Yes, but she was independent. She lived by herself. But I would go down there every day.
So you spend a lot of time with her?
Yes.
That's wonderful. So, are there other things about your childhood you want to talk about? I know you wanted to kind of set the just a little bit of background, but concentrate more on your life together. Can you think of some happy memories maybe with at home or with your sisters?
Well, I'm trying to think. We would always go down to the Christmas parade together. I remember that. We'd take the bus down, my sisters, myself, and we'd go meet my mom at her work. And she watched this, you know, she worked at the city and county building. So we'd go over, we'd go eat and have soup someplace and then go watch the parade. And we looked forward to that every year. We didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't do a lot of traveling. But we spent a lot of time at home, mainly working. And working in the garden. My mom had a beautiful garden, and so we were always working with flowers.
Did you grow vegetables too?
No, we didn't. We didn't grow vegetables. We just grew flowers, but, you know. But we always had to take rocks out of the garden and stuff like that. So, you know, it was kind of our work ethic. You know, you had to see how many rocks we'd get during a day and that kind of stuff, you know.
What other sort of values or do you think that your parents tried to form in you? You have a strong work ethic, and what else would you describe?
I don't know what else they tried to form in me. I guess a sense of loyalty, you know, I guess. And my main thing was just the work ethic and the loyalty. My mother tried hard, you know, to try and do things that were right, but we really didn't have a lot of togetherness time. It was like I said, when I said before, I felt like I raised myself a little bit. You know, she did the best she could under the circumstances.
Sounds like you admire her quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. I do.
Do you want to restate that and just say, I really admire my mother?
Okay.
Put it in your own words.
Yeah, I really admire my mother for how hard she worked and the responsibilities that she had and how she carried through with them.
Okay. Is there anything else coming to mind, or shall we spend some time with Wally?
Let's spend some time with
What about
Wally.
high school? Do you want to talk about
Oh, I
that?
went to Highland High School. I graduated in 1963 and went to Hillside Junior High in Dilworth. I don't have anything
Did
else.
you know pretty young what you might want to do with your life when you grew up? Did you think about a career, or did you want to get married, or?
For a while I wanted to be a nurse, and then I decided I didn't want to do that, and I didn't really have any really high aspirations. Probably teach. I was probably going to be a teacher, you know, be a school teacher, but it wasn't anything that and then I ended up finding out that I loved, you know, early childhood education and kids like that way. So, but when I was in school, I was thinking more of a high school teacher.
And then you went to college.
Yeah, I went to the University of Utah. That's where I met Wally.
Great.
So, should we let Wally?
Should we talk? Yeah.
Wally,
we'll
Wally,
get
come on.
So, Wally, tell us your full name.
Wallace Tippett Boyack's my full name. And Tippett is my mother's maiden name. Wallace is W-A-L-L-A-C-E. Tippett is T-I-P-P-E-T-T-S. And Boyack is B-O-Y-A-C-K.
And how did you get this name?
I don't know. Other than my mother's maiden name, I don't know why I was named Wallace.
Have you liked your name?
It's okay.
You can say, my name's...
Yeah, my name's all right. Could be worse, let's put it that way.
And do you know any details about the day you were born?
No, I don't. I was the fourth of 5 children, and so I think I was born, a year and a half after my brother was born. So I think my mother was pretty busy, and there's nothing that stands out about the day I was born, other than when I grew up, November 29th was Admiral Byrd Day. And so on the calendars were penguins on my birthday.
That's a great thing for a kid to remember.
That's right. They've disappeared now, though, because Admiral Byrd has slipped away, I think.
Unfortunately. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Fort Collins, Colorado, and we lived there for the first 8 years of my life. Fort Collins is a small town. It's on the western or eastern slope of the Rockies, and it's a college town. It's where Colorado A&M was, which is now Colorado State University. And we kind of had, as kids, we could go all over the place. It was just a nice town, and so that's what we did.
Just went all over the place. Is that a euphemism for got in a little bit of trouble?
Oh, we didn't get in too much trouble. It was all fairly innocent. Although, you know, my mother had 4 and 5 kids that she had to take care of and watch out for. And my father was a traveling salesman, so he wasn't around all the time. His territory was Colorado. He worked for the Utah woolen mills, and he had customers, and instead of selling things that were ready-made, he sold things that were tailor-made. And so what I remember is he had his sample cases that he would bring in with him, and from time to time he'd open those up and we'd look at those things. And you know, it was mainly dress-up clothes or formal clothes that his customers would have.
Now, where did your family move after that?
Well, after that, we moved to Salt Lake. And the reason was that in Fort Collins, it was a small branch of the church, and my parents were quite religious. And so when my brother Jim entered high school, his sophomore year, and my sister was entering junior high as a 7th grader, my parents decided to move to Utah. So that's what they did.
A bigger base of youth.
Well, I think the main reason was they wanted the kids to grow up having Mormon friends. And so that's what they did.
Did your father continue being a salesman for the woolen mills?
Yes, he did. My father continued being a salesman for the woolen mills, and so his absences from the home were longer because it was a longer distance for him to travel. And when I was a teenager, sometimes he was gone 6 weeks at a time. So,
It's a lot for your mom to manage.
yes, yeah, there were 5 children, and so she had a lot to do, and she was a hard worker.
Tell me 3 other adjectives that describe your mother.
Oh, she was devoted. She cared for her family, and she was very loyal to the church. Growing up, the 3 goals that all of the kids had set for them were temple marriage, getting an education, and what was the third one? Temple marriage, education, and serving a mission for the boys.
So how many boys? You had 3 boys.
4 boys.
4 boys.
4 boys and 1 daughter,
Sorry.
a sister.
Sister, yes.
And she was the second, though. She and my mother were good friends.
I can imagine. And you tell me about your father. Tell me, describe his personality.
Well, he was very outgoing as a salesman and was actually very charming. And people liked him. And so he was a little distant at home, in part just because he wasn't there as much. And when he was home, he had a lot of other things to do. And so I think that kind of describes him, but he was a good father and a good provider.
What are some qualities you think you inherited from each of your parents?
Oh, I don't know. I was quite independent from my parents in many respects, but probably trying to be dedicated and devoted and to work hard and to care about other people.
Do you remember being little and planning out your future? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I don't know that I really did much planning of my future other than the things that I already mentioned, going on a mission and going to college. As far as what I was going to be, I thought about different things at different times. I had 2 uncles who were lawyers, and so I kind of focused on that more than anything else.
Do you think your kids would be interested in where you went to school, or do they pretty much know that?
Well, I don't know. They may. I can be brief about that. I went to William Penn Elementary. I started there in the 3rd grade. Then I went to Central Junior High for my 7th and 8th grade, and that was on 2nd East and 30th South. The school district moved the kids around where I lived pretty much at will, and I think it was because the parents were supportive and they could move us wherever they wanted and get away with it. Then I went to, actually I was scheduled to go to Olympus High School, and then they shifted the boundaries when I was an entering sophomore, and my brother and I ended up at Granite.
Let's see. So going to college, though, was that something that, oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to ask you, so did you end up going on a mission, and where did you serve?
Oh, yes, I went on a mission. I started school a little earlier, and so I was one of the youngest in my classes. In Colorado, I could start a year earlier, so that's what happened. And I think the cutoff in Colorado was November 30th, and my birthday was November 29th. And so I was always a little younger than the other kids. And consequently, when I was called on a mission, a lot of my friends had already gone. The other thing that was interesting is the church changed the date when you could go on a mission. Previously, it had been 20 years of age, and they dropped it to 19. And so right at that moment, there were kind of a double crop of prospective missionaries. And when I went on my mission, there were probably 6,000 or 8,000 missionaries.
Where did you serve?
I was called to the North German mission and went into the mission home in January of 1961. And back then we had missionary farewells, and you actually had a program printed up with all of the things that were going to happen. This is just an interesting side note, I think, anyway, is that my missionary farewell, they had, my brother played the trombone, so we had a trombone quartet. And one of the members of the quartet was Gerald Otley, along with my brother. So he became famous later, not because he played in the quartet at my farewell, but for other reasons. The other thing that was interesting is at that time they had contributions. They had a box, and people would put money in it. And at my farewell, somebody stole the contributions.
So you didn't have any extra change when you went out? Oh, my.
Yeah, well, actually, the bishop gave me a little money, but that was kind of it. I've often, not often, but from time to time, I've wondered who got the money, what'd they do with it.
Sure. All right. Well, any other things you would like to talk about your childhood?
Oh, it was a good childhood. I had a lot of friends. I grew up next to the Highland Drive-In Theater, and so on the other side of the street, that property abutted the Highland Drive-In Theater, and they would run speakers to the back end of the lots. And so we actually pushed an old car out next to the fence, and we had a speaker, and we could sit in the car and watch the movies. And then down the street was a barn, and it had an upper floor in it, and that family cut some of the boards out of the end of the upstairs in the barn, and they had a speaker, and we'd watch the movies there too. And they had goats underneath, so you'd watch the movie while you listened to the goats rumbling around.
That's a great memory.
Yeah, and then I figured out pretty early that if I wanted things, I had to earn the money myself. And so I started to work when I was 8 years old as a spud nut salesman. And I'd go door to door, and you'd either sell a bag of 6 or a bag with a dozen. And then you would go back and report in, and you'd give the money to the proprietor of the store, and then you'd get your cut. Then I was a paper boy for 3 years, and then I was a caddy at the country club, and you got $3 for each round if you carried one bag, and you got $6 for each round if you carried 2. And sometimes you'd do 2 18 holes in a day, and that'd tire you out. What I remember about that is the older caddies, because a lot of them were alcoholics. And right then I resolved and made the decision that I didn't want to drink. Not to sound that I was a smart kid or anything, but that just didn't have much appeal. One of the caddies, and when it got cold, they didn't have as many golfers, and so the caddy business declined. But I actually saw a couple of the caddies, the older alcoholic caddies, with aftershave, a bottle of aftershave in their pockets, and they would drink that because they couldn't afford the liquor. And that stuff makes your face tingle, so you wonder what it would do to your stomach.
How old were you when you had this job?
I was, probably about 14, 15, and 16. And sometimes I'd walk home from the country club, which was, after going 18 holes, you'd walk home. And it was before the freeway was built. There was a big gully there. And then on Murphy's Lane, where I grew up, there was a milk processing plant. And so my brother and I would work there, sometimes doing cleanup and different things. Then we helped run the routes early in the morning. And then I became the bottle washer. And I had an everyday job. And I got paid so much a day for washing the bottles. And basically ran a machine. You'd put them in and take them out.
Not bad, though.
Not bad for a kid.
So
Not
by
bad.
the time you graduated from high school, you might have had a nice little nest egg.
I had a car,
So that
and
would
so
make you
I
money.
didn't have a nest egg anymore.
What kind of car did you buy?
I bought my sister's car, and it was a 53 Chevrolet four-door 210. And at that time, the kids would fiddle around with their cars. They were called lead sleds. And you'd take the ornaments off and fill up the holes with lead. And we even took off the back door handles. And then you would lower the cars. And so they were underslung, what it was called. And then the fashion became to lower the front end and have the back end up in the air a little bit. And then you had spotlights for decoration that didn't spotlight. They were just there. And then the other thing, you had what they called leg plugs, which tied into the exhaust system. And if you unplugged the plugs at the end, then it didn't go through your muffler. But that was all kind of stuff that you had as a kid. And I never had the money to join a car club, but that was, I don't know if it was the next step up, but that's one thing you could do. And the car clubs I remember were the Jesters and Crusaders. And then there were some others, but I don't remember. We spent a lot of time cruising State Street. I have to tell one story about my friend Jimmy Devine. He lived on a street that didn't have curbs. They just had shallow curbs where the water would come down. And he had a fire hydrant in front of his house, and there were some kids in his neighborhood who would drive up over the lawns with their cars and knock down the snowmen. And so Jimmy built a snowman over the fire hydrant. And lo and behold, these guys came down and hit Jimmy's snowman. And luckily, Jimmy's dad was a plumber, and so he could turn the fire hydrant off once it was gushing water. Anyway, that's kind of typical of some of the things that Jimmy did.
No, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't alone, it sounds like.
Well,
like you
he
were a
was
witness.
pretty inventive. And then there was a fellow named Jonesy who was a little older than I, and he was kind of a comedian, but he became an alcoholic. And one of the sad moments was I got up to work in the dairy one day, and there was Jonesy asleep on the bridge with a bottle of booze. And it was like 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And for some reason, I still remember that. And then he went into the Navy and came back, and he was a full-fledged alcoholic. And he lived by Trolley Square and passed out one night and hit his head on a radiator and bled to death. So there's some good things and some bad things. My two older siblings were excellent students. So I was always told, why couldn't I be more like them?
How did
Didn't
that
quite. Oh, I don't know. I knew they were good students, so it didn't affect me much, but it was just it was a constant.
You felt the pressure.
Oh, I don't know if it was pressure. I just was reminded of that.
Well, let's talk about going to college. Where did
Okay.
Where did you go to school?
Well, I went to the University of Utah. I had what was called a presidential scholarship, which sounds more impressive than it was, but it helped me pay my tuition. So I'm always grateful for that, because my parents didn't have the money to pay for college.
And you'd spend all yours on that fancy car.
Well, I still worked.
Sure.
Still worked, and the car was gone by then, I think.
So this is post-mission, and you go to college. And did you meet at your first year at school?
No, it was later, and Gaylynne was taking a business class or two because she was going to teach how to teach in high school shorthand.
Business education.
Business education, but it was primarily, I think anyway, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was primarily teaching girls how to do shorthand.
Typing and
Yeah, typing.
accounting and it's called
Yeah.
business education.
And I was in accounting at the business school, and anyway, we met in the library.
Do you remember the first time you saw her?
Almost.
What do you remember about it, Gaylynne?
Well, I remember meeting him before that. And then I ran into him at the library. Wally had been in student government, was an officer up at the University of Utah. And I remember voting for him for an office, and I didn't even know who he was. But the name Wally Boyack just kind of stuck with me, you know. It just was a name you just remembered. So I think that when I talked to him and met him, I told him I voted for him, and he must have been impressed. So I think that's why he asked me out on a date. I don't know.
Do you remember your first date?
Oh, I don't know if it was the first date, but I remember a date. We went out to what's called the Valley Music Hall, and I think it was Chad and Jeremy, wasn't it?
It was Robert Goulet.
Oh, was it Robert Goulet? No, it wasn't Robert Goulet. It was Jerry Jones or something, wasn't it?
It was the one guy singing. I thought it was Robert Goulet.
Yeah,
Singing.
I
The
don't-
Camelot guy. He sang
Yeah,
Camelot.
well, that's Camelot. That's Robert Goulet then.
And it was the Valley Music Hall. You don't even probably know what that is, but
That's out in Bountiful, and the church owns it now. It was the theater in the round.
You went to. That's a kind of impressive first date. Did you want to impress her? Did you like her that quickly, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. Can't remember now. I think it
Probably
was
just
just
say
one of
yes.
those things. Yeah, definitely I wanted to impress her and figured I had to put on a good show to have a chance. And we double dated with a friend of mine who's now the president of Ohio State University, Gordon Gee.
That's fun. That's fun. So, what first impressed you about Wally?
oh, his outgoing personality, and I can't remember where we were on one of the other dates or something, but I saw him talking to children, and I just kind of thought, you know, he would be a cute father, you know. I always kind of judge people by how they treat children, And I even, when I was raising our kids, I always told them that as a story, is that you can tell a lot about somebody's character by how they would treat somebody's younger siblings. And I was always impressed with Wally, with how how he treated children and people younger than him, and I thought that was nice. So I kind of thought, he's a nice guy.
Maybe I should pursue this a little bit. How about you, Wally? What are some of the things that attracted you about her personality?
Oh, she was conscientious, and she was pretty comfortable with who she was, and didn't put on any false airs. Some of the girls up at the U were, for lack of a better description, were snooty, but Gaylynne wasn't that way at all.
So you
She was
felt-
pretty
you.
down to earth and all. Somebody came to the door, I think.
No, that was the wind blowing the shutters in there.
Okay.
So you felt comfortable with her.
Yes.
How did you decide that you wanted to marry each other?
Oh, it's just over time, that's kind of what happens, I think. I don't know that there was any events also. Yeah, it just happened that way, and so we decided to get married.
Tell me, what do you remember about your wedding day? Just
Oh, it was kind of came and went in a hurry. That's what I remember. We had a small wedding, and so it wasn't a big celebration and all. So that's pretty much how that happened. We had family there and that sort of thing.
a simple, quiet wedding.
Yes.
Yeah, we were going to be moved, and then we were going to move back east, so we wanted to save the money.
So had you already been accepted to Georgetown?
Yes.
When you proposed, then you knew you were going to marry an attorney.
Yes.
Were you ready for the next few years? Law school can be particularly difficult on a spouse.
I didn't know what to expect, but yes, but I was excited to go to Washington, D.C., I hadn't really been away from home or hadn't really traveled much. So that was an exciting time for me.
So tell me about the first home that you had.
Oh, the first one we bought, the first home we bought was in Arlington, Virginia. And actually there's an intersection, it's Lee Highway and Glebe Road. And we lived in 3 different places, and they were all near or at least close to that intersection. And so the first home was on North 24th Street, and it was 5000 North 24th Street. It was a smaller home. It had 2 bedrooms on the main floor, and then up above there were 2 bedrooms also. And the basement was unfinished. It was on a fairly good-sized lot with a lot of trees. It didn't have a garage, and that's kind of it. It was a modest home.
It's a Cape Cod style. And our son actually lives kind of right by that intersection. So he lives in the same neighborhood that we bought our first house.
Yeah, same ward.
An interesting thing about that neighborhood is, and on that street without a driveway, our second child was born in that driveway. And so I just remember, every time we go back to Virginia, we drive by that street, drive by that house. And so we had a fast baby.
Wow. So you just started for the hospital, and tell me that story.
Well, quickly, to make it quick, I'd been to the doctor that day. I went to the only LDS obstetrician back in the Washington, D.C. area. He told me I had 2 to 3 more weeks. And I was really due December 16th, and he was born November 30th, December 1st, right around midnight. We weren't sure at the time. And I just started labor really quick. I'd been to the library until it closed at 9 and came home, and it was probably about 11 o'clock, I think. I felt like I wasn't feeling right. And I think from first pain to birth, there was like 20 minutes. It was just really quick. And I should have been smart enough to figure out why I had a hard time walking down to get into the car. I had a hard time walking out my front steps and walking very slowly. And it's the minute I got in the car, I felt like I had a really bad pain. And while I was trying to put my luggage in the trunk, and I said, I think I just had a baby. And he said, no. And there was the baby. And so we had it really quick. And then Wally went back, and after the baby was born, I had a cute story by saying, on the way out, I said, well, I think we should say a prayer. And he says, no, we don't have any time for a prayer. We'll say one on the way. And then I said, dear God, please help us. That was my prayer right then, right? Because the baby came so fast. And Wally went back in the house, and I'm thinking he's calling an ambulance. But he really called the doctor to say I'd had the baby. And the doctor said, since she's already in the car, just go ahead and go, because it'll take 15 or 20 minutes for him to find you and get back to the hospital. So that's what we did. And so it was a quick baby. And actually, we were lucky because he was our smallest baby. He was 6'15" and a half. And so I was lucky that he was our smallest one.
So that's your second child. So you'd already had a boy or a girl?
A boy.
Oh, boy.
We have 4 boys and 1 girl.
Well, that sounds
But-
familiar.
Yeah. Same as Wally.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
So-
our girl was the youngest.
Well, let's go back again for just a second. I want to get to talking about the kids kind of one by one. Tell me about the house being close to the cemetery.
Oh, that's a different house.
Oh, excuse me. Okay.
And we were renting a house, and it was on 200 South Glebe. And if you went straight down
2nd Street.
2nd Street, the 200th Street, you went right into the gate for Fort Myer.
It's the back gate.
Yeah, and Fort Myer is the Army base adjacent to the Arlington Cemetery. And so when Gaylynne was working, we would drop off Eric, and then we would drive through the Arlington Cemetery on our way to work. And it saved quite a bit of traffic.
So tell me about what your life was like while he was busy studying.
Well, I worked for a couple of the years, the first couple of years, until our second child was born. But all along I was really interested in all the different activities that are taking place in Washington, D.C., and I wanted to be able to take advantage of it. And I had a friend that lived in the neighborhood, and she was also in the same category, like things like I did. And so whenever something would be coming up, we would just cart our children off. And, we saw President Eisenhower's funeral cortege. And then Blackjack was the rudderless, was the famous horse that they would have be a symbol of a fallen leader. Like when President Kennedy died, there was always this black horse, and he'd have his boots facing backwards, which would be a sign of a fallen hero. We went to his birthday party every year, that Blackjack, and I think Eric at Fort Myer, and I think Eric had his picture in the newspaper. Our one son, and my friend's daughter. Interestingly enough, Eric is married to this friend's daughter, but they didn't get together until years and years later. But anyway, we would run to those things, and then we went down to all the different when Prince Charles and Princess Anne came to D.C. We went down and went to a garden party in the area where they were, when there would be new openings at the Smithsonian or the children's. They didn't really have a children's museum then. They had children's rooms in different parts of the museums. We would go. I mean, I would just take off, and we were still poor because while I was in school, so I bought an old buggy for like $2.50 at a thrift store, and so I put Morgan in it, and we would take off, and he could sleep in it. When I'd still take it up and down, put it in the car, and we went to everything. Went to Georgetown. We went to. I knew when there was, the free day that you could go here, the free day that you could go there, so we took advantage of that. So I even had one of my neighbors in D.C. that was born and raised there would call me and ask me questions because I knew more about visiting, things to see. So I felt like I really took advantage of being there because I knew I wasn't going to be there forever. And that was fun for the kids.
And our favorite building was the Library of Congress. And it's just spectacular with the exhibits they have, and then just the building itself was amazing. The other thing that's a little bit of interest is I had a patronage job, and I was an elevator operator in the Senate office buildings, and so ran an elevator for a while and saw the senators and different things like that. That was through Senator Bennett, Senator Robert Bennett's father.
Senior.
Yeah, he wasn't a senior.
No, but he was the oldest.
Yeah.
The older Senator
Anyway.
Bennett.
And then we found Williamsburg, and we quite liked Williamsburg, and we went to some of the Civil War battlefields and that sort of thing.
Williamsburg we've loved so much that even to this day we have a year's pass that we would go back. And I always wanted to retire and go back and be a tour guide at Williamsburg. I mean, that's not lofty.
You should be very good at it.
But I just thought it was wonderful, the clothes they'd wear and all the history that took place and why they did that. And so I still love Williamsburg. We have a Williamsburg calendar and just little things like that. I still have lots of things from Williamsburg around here, you know.
Well, tell me about moving to Utah.
Well, at the time, we had other opportunities, and we almost went to Houston, Texas, and decided against that, and moved instead to Salt Lake, and I transferred with the SEC and became what was called an enforcement attorney, where we enforced the securities laws. And
One thing I was going to say that made a big decision for me is that I didn't have any grandparents growing up, and I felt like I missed a part of my life, and I wanted our children to have grandparents. And so to me, it'd be worth less money to come to Salt Lake, but to have our children have grandparents around.
and both sets were still alive
And both sets
then.
were still alive. So to me, that was the deciding factor, not the money. And you know, the opportunity in Houston was much better than what we took here, but in the long run, it really wasn't.
So you were sort of, it was that loyalty,
Yeah,
again,
probably.
coming out, choosing family over other things.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Well, right after we moved here, our third son was born, and then we had 3 years later, we had Wes, and then we had Ashley.
2.5 years
And
later.
so we've lived in this house ever since we moved back.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Yep.
Tell me the names of each one of your kids and maybe a couple of words to describe what they were like as children.
Eric Andrew Boyack's our oldest son, and I see he was very clever in the fact that he could read people very well, you know, and he still can. Don't you think?
Yes.
How would you describe, what word would you say other than that?
Oh, he's just quite insightful. You can tell him about the primary chorister. I thought
Oh,
that
this
was
was
a good
interesting.
story.
When we moved here, there was a cute little lady that lived down another street below us, and she was just really vivacious and cute. But she was with the primary chorister, and she just was so wonderful and sweet to everybody's kids. But and Eric used to play with her oldest boy, and she would just yell all the time, and be really mean to her kids. And he said to her one time, "Sister Shaw, how come you're so nice to everybody else's kids and so mean to your own?" And I didn't ever know that, but she came up and told me, she said, that was a real eye-opener. Other people are noticing that. So I want you to tell Eric that I was really grateful that he told me that.
And he was quite young then. He didn't do it to be a smart aleck
he was
or
probably
anything.
6 or 7.
It just didn't make any sense to him, you know. So he told her.
And so he was kind of cute that way. And then
Yeah.
Morgan was our second child. He was the one that was born in the car. And how would you describe him?
Smooth,
Yeah, smooth. He was kind of your,
ladies' man.
yeah, charismatic. He could seem to get things very easily just through his personality and his
Yeah, quite charming.
charming, and was nice looking. And a cute story about him is when he was in grade school too. The teacher was doing a writing project with English, and so it was a special class, and he was given. And she said, "Okay, Morgan, I want you to give this apple to the prettiest girl in the class. What would you do? And choose somebody. And he looked around and he gave it to the teacher. And she said, I felt like a child. I had a childhood crush, that I had on them. But anyway, she wasn't expecting that. So she said, he is a smooth kid. And then Morgan is Morgan Adam Boyack. And then there's Ryan Anthony Boyack.
Yeah, he was probably our best athlete. He could play a lot of different sports, and in some ways, it was.
He was good at everything he
Yeah.
did. He was smart.
And he may have been better just to have stayed with one sport, but he could do kind of everything, and did.
He was young like Wally in his grade. His birthday was October 25th. But he was still a student leader and a very good athlete. And even though he was the youngest one all the time. And
Had a lot of friends, a lot
Yeah.
of good friends, still does.
And yeah, he really is still devoted. He has lots of friends. He is very social and has good friends. And then our next son is Weston Alexander Boyack. And he's kind of our clown. He's just really fun and outgoing and really cute personality. And social, too. What do you want to say about him? I don't know, other than he's a warm-hearted kid. Time.
Do you go back to
Can
Weston?
you restate that part about
Yeah,
Weston?
just
again?
why don't you start with Weston?
Yeah, I'm sorry about it's my fault.
Okay.
Oh, that's
What
okay.
else should I say about him?
Oh, that's
Why don't
fine.
you start it over again? It's just that he had to change something out.
Okay.
So,
Weston Alexander Boyack is our fourth son. And he has kind of had a really outgoing personality and kind of a clown. And everybody loved him. He's funny, and he's still funny to this day. And he just was an outgoing, heartwarming, and very sensitive child. Just as everybody loves him, and it's still that kind of personality. And then it's Ashley Ann Boyack, it's our little girl, and she was a nice surprise for us. They even thought I was going to have another boy. In those days, they didn't have, the sonograms, ultrasounds and stuff like that. And they went by the heartbeat, and the doctor told us it was another boy. And Wally told me that you'd have to be a good mother to have 5 boys. So I was going to be, told me I had to be special. So all that time I was thinking I was special. And then I had this little girl, and I didn't care about being special anymore. And so it was fun to have her and raise her. And she grew up knowing how to talk with boys and handle boys and men. And she was very self-assured and a very good student and a social as well.
Well, she had very high standards, too.
Yes.
That's one thing that she just, maintained those. And
She knew what she wanted at early dates, and so, her age, she knew what she wanted to do, and so she was good.
that's wonderful. That's fun. With the time we have left, we've got you wanted to talk about traveling, 9/11, Toy Store, and then there's a couple of wrap-up questions I'd like to
Okay.
ask. Do you want to do?
Should I say anything about the toy store or not? Is that not worth
yeah, well, no, that was a big part of your life. I can
Okay.
talk about the toy store.
it? Okay, that's good.
Yeah, we kind of wanted to be entrepreneurs and didn't quite know how to go about doing it. But back east in Washington, we saw these toy stores that specialized in higher quality toys and European toys and educational toys. So when we moved out here, we decided to open a store like that. And so we did, and I think it was when was it,
74.
1974, and it was called the Red Balloon, and we bought a lot of our fixtures and different things at the Cress's store that was going out of business, and we set it up and got the inventory and went to some toy shows and established accounts and that sort of thing, and away we went. And it was moderately successful. We had quite a bit of competition, and for the time that we put into it, I think it did quite well. And we had some very loyal customers, and also very loyal employees. They they were with us most of the time the store was open, and Gaylynne pretty much ran it on a day-to-day basis and did the ordering and that sort of thing, but it's a lot of work. That's one thing we found out. And finally it just came to a point where it was time to move on. And so that's what we did. That was in 93 or 94.
We sold it to a customer.
Yeah, we sold
It's
it.
still running.
And it's still in operation. And some of the competition's gone out of business, so they've had, I think that's actually helped them a little bit.
That's a big deal. And did your kids work in it when they were in high school?
Well, yes, Morgan did a little bit,
Well,
and
so did
Ryan
Eric.
and Eric. Yeah, they all did a little bit, and then
Ashley did.
And I didn't.
Wes did.
Yeah, I didn't really work physically every day. You know, maybe on Tuesdays. On the other days, I did all the bookwork and everything here at home, and did all the ordering at home and stuff. But the kids enjoyed with it too, because and we had their insights. This was a good toy. Maybe this and isn't, and this is this, and so it was kind of fun because we had our own little market, our own marketing group.
Yeah, we'd go to the shows in New York and then down on the coast. And sometimes we'd take them, and then I think they were so rambunctious at the one in California that they banned children after that. We think that was the Boyack rule. As far as 9/11 goes, we had tried to go up to Prince Edward Island and Halifax. I think the year before, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were going to try and go, but something
Yeah,
happened.
something happened that we didn't go, and so we decided to go in 2001, and we were delayed, and so I think the flight was full or something.
And the night before it was raining.
Yeah, and so we decided we were going to fly to Newark from Washington, D.C., and then fly from Newark to Halifax. And we got on the plane, and we were part way to Newark, and the pilot came on the intercom and said, "There's a problem in Newark, and we're not quite sure what's going to happen." And then the next time he came on, he said, "We're going to land in Philadelphia." And by that time, a fellow with a cell phone had gotten a call about the terrorist attack there.
So he called on his own.
Yeah, so he called on his own. So people who say that you can't get cell phones on airplanes, that's part of the conspiracy theory. It's just plain wrong. Anyway, we landed in Philadelphia, and upon landing, we were herded out of the terminal. And luckily, we got a cab. I have a whistle that I can blow. That's my own whistle. Anyway, I whistled at a cab, and he stopped for us, and we hopped in, and we had a co-passenger. And anyway, we ended up going into town, and with our luggage and all, and we were trying to figure out where to stay, and then we called our son Eric.
Couldn't find a room.
And yeah, although one of the hotels there said, "Don't worry, if we have to put up extra beds, we will," they really went out of their way to accommodate us. And anyway, Eric's father-in-law was in Philadelphia, and he had just left, and so he turned around and came back and picked us up, and off we went back to D.C., and we stayed with Eric for 3 or 4 days.
And what was interesting, too, is that it took him about 2.5 hours to come back because all the roads were closed, and there was that one flight that was down in Pennsylvania. While we were in Philadelphia, there were all these false alarms that the Independence Hall was being bombed, and there were sirens going back and forth all the time in Philadelphia. And then when we drove back down, when the father-in-law came back and picked us up, he decided rather than going down the main freeway, we were going to go back through the backwards way through Gettysburg. And it took a little bit longer, but maybe not because of the traffic. But when we pulled into Washington, all the bridges, there were, what do you want to call them? They were not Hummers, but big, what do you call those, Wally?
Personnel carriers.
Oh, yeah, well.
Tanks?
Yeah, there were tanks across the bridges and, I mean, everything, and National Guard all over the place, and then, so we couldn't go home, obviously, because the air, all the airlines were, and the airplanes were all down, and so we stayed there, and we were there to see the candlelight vigil at the Pentagon, and we were there for about a week.
Yeah, it was about 4 days.
For 5 days before they opened the airports again. But it was kind of an interesting thing, and it was frightening in Philadelphia, because we just had our luggage, and we were walking back and forth with our luggage trying to find hotel rooms. The last one finally said, we'll put you up with cots in the
Yeah, and then
banquet halls.
the travel, because of our first trip to Europe was in 1983, and we hadn't been to Europe prior to that, but we went in '83, and then did we go a couple of times?
In '84, I took my mother and sisters.
Yeah.
And one
Yeah,
of our
that's
kids.
right. We made a couple of more trips, and then once Gaylynne worked for the airline, we'd take a trip or 2 or 3 every year.
Yeah.
So we've probably, not to boast, but we've been over to Europe quite a bit, and to
Our kids have had the
to France and England and Germany and Italy and Portugal
Spain.
and Belgium
Scotland.
and Spain, Scotland, Ireland,
Israel,
yeah, Israel. Gaylynne's been to Israel twice. I've been once.
Egypt, China,
You went to Egypt. You went to China. Gaylynne's gone more than I have.
and in South America, we went down to pick our one son up from a mission in Brazil.
Yeah,
And so-
Weston.
and
We went
so-
to the Iguazu Falls. I don't know if you've heard of those. And went to Rio and San Paulo and then a place called Campo Grande, which is right on the edge of the Pantanal. And that's where Wes had served his mission. And I don't know how much more time we have.
About 10 minutes, it's fine.
All four.
Oh, okay. Well,
All four
Gaylynne can
boys.
talk then.
Oh, I was just saying, all 4 boys went on missions.
She does want to have, she has a few questions at the end that we'd like to
Yeah.
ask, so keep that in mind.
Well, why don't we do those now? And
Well,
then,
it's fine, you can keep going with that.
Well, if you
I don't
could-
know how
why
much
don't
time you
maybe
need
give
for
us-
those.
maybe- why don't we have maybe one story of a trip that you took with the kids that is a memory that just stands out as one of your.
Okay.
well, the big one was
Boyack,
1995.
It's the only time we took all 4.
Yeah, and we took all 5 kids.
7 of us.
And so, yeah, there was a total of 7. And what was it, a couple of weeks?
Yeah. Like,
We rented
like 16 or 18 days. Right?
Yeah, we rented a Volkswagen van, and we could all fit in that, and away we went. And we went to Switzerland, and went into Berlin, and went to Munich, and went to Dresden, and went to Prague, and stayed there. And then we went to Salzburg, and then we went into Vienna and stayed with some friends of ours who had worked out a deal where they had a house there in Vienna, and they traded their house with these people. And in Vienna, they have what they call a ring street, and that's where the old wall was. And it's kind of a main thoroughfare. Well, we were actually inside the ring street. That's how close we were to the downtown.
To the main cathedral.
Yeah. And so that really worked out well. And we all had a good time. And then once we were done there, we kind of went our separate ways. But it was a great trip.
Yeah, our 3 boys stayed longer, and they would travel by themselves. And then Wes and Ashley came home with us because they were still, high school age and stuff, and so they were a little bit younger. The other 2 were, college or post-mission. The one thing I do want to say on this trip, though, we went, the first night we stayed in Eisenach, was that it?
Yeah.
From Germany, and that was former East Germany. And and this was fairly new for them, and we stayed at a Holiday Inn that we had a free breakfast the next morning. And I guess they had never really seen a group of people. You know, one family was seven of us, and we had free breakfast. And our boys had been really hungry because we came in the night before, and they ate and ate and ate. And I still remember looking at the waiters and the people looking that they couldn't believe these kids were eating so much. And I wonder if they still had free breakfast after that. The kids still laugh about that, looking at people's eyes, looking at them, and drinking the chocolate milk and having all that food, you know. And I said, well, those people probably weren't used to seeing that much food because it was fairly new for them to be over there. And
That was a brand new hotel there in Eisenach.
Eisenach is, I'd never heard of that town, but that's the town that Martin Luther went up to the Reformation, where he wrote his proclamation for the Reformation. Was in that town. But anyway.
Yeah, we did a lot of things.
Yeah.
That sounds like fun. What fascinating! I wish we had a couple more hours, because there's a lot of really fascinating stories here.
We can get out our mission slides and show
There
those.
you go. Did you serve a mission as a couple?
No,
No.
Oh, okay.
no.
Our 4 boys all went on mission, so.
I was referring to my mission
Oh,
slides.
okay. That sounds great. Well, tell me, what are some of the things you've learned in your life in terms of, for instance, let's start here, how to get through tough times. What are just maybe a couple of pieces of advice you'd give to your grandchildren for how to handle those challenges that come our way?
It's all in your attitude and how you look at the problems, and how you can figure out tomorrow will be a better day, and just keep your attitude positive and have a sense of humor. You know, if something crazy happens, you can find something funny or something good about everything. And that's a funny story that just reminded me of that with Wes. Remember when Ashley got in an accident? This is a funny story quickly. She was the only one that had had a car accident, and she was crying, that she had done something, and her older brothers. And Wes said, well, don't feel bad, sis. Think about it this way. You're the only one in the family that's been able to see an airbag. So there's a positive side to everything. And that just reminded me of that. I wouldn't have thought of that story for ages, but that's why I said there's a positive side of every experience. And so, keep a positive attitude and find some humor in it.
Well, the other thing is, a lot of the things that we think are important aren't. And sometimes we get hung up on those, or they become points of contention. And in the overall scheme of things, they don't matter. And it's a mistake to make big deals out of little things. And one guy, the other thing is don't talk about your troubles too much. There was one fellow I heard on TV, and he said, don't tell people your problems. He said 20% don't care, and 80% are glad you got them. And so I think it's good, not to air all your concerns to others. But the other thing is just to keep things in perspective, because day to day these things that come up just aren't that important.
Well, what would you say is your greatest accomplishment?
The children.
Yeah.
Would you restate that, our greatest
Oh,
accomplishment?
yeah, my greatest accomplishment,
Okay,
or our greatest accomplishment, is the children. We're very proud of them and who they are,
what they've become.
and what they've accomplished, and the standards that they have, and the lives they've chosen to lead.
Amen. They've all been good kids. Been fortunate we didn't have any troubles with any of them, and they're all married in the temple, and they've all been on missions. And
Well, the main thing is who they are
yeah,
and what they stand for.
that's right.
What advice would you, is there anything in particular you'd like your grandchildren to remember, to think about beyond?
Oh, just be true to yourself. That's the main thing. Decide who you are, and be true to yourself, and have certain standards that you abide by and live by. And
Stay close to the Lord.
Yeah.
Follow your, always give you good direction.
Yeah, and don't be too influenced by others. You know, be your own person and be true to yourself. Gaylynne gets all the credit for the kids
No,
and
I
how,
don't.
you know, what they've accomplished and who they are. She's a really good mother, and
Well, thank you.
I just
He's
sort
really a
of
good
tag
father.
along.
He's been a good father too, you know. And, you know, we're proud of our children, which I'm sure most people, everybody is, but, you know,
And our grandkids.
and our
You know,
grandkids.
they've all seemed to have started out well.
And we
so.
have 13 grandkids. I don't know if I put that in there. 10 grandsons and 3 granddaughters. So we're heavy on boys. It's a good thing the name's Boyack, right? But anyway, yes, I don't know. They're all great.
Good for you.
Thank
That's
you.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you.